When a judge, someone who has seen humanity at its absolute worst, calls a crime utterly depraved, you know it's beyond horrific. And at the center of this nightmare, a woman who turned trust into terror, a woman who was supposed to protect, but became the monster in the dark. Anthony Delgado was just 17 months old, barely beginning to explore the world. His laughter-filled rooms, his tiny hands reached out in curiosity, and like all children, he trusted without question. His mother, his family, even the people they relied on to care for him. But trust is a dangerous thing when placed in the wrong hands. Gloria Fields was supposed to be a helping hand, a neighbor, someone Anthony's mother, Marta, believed she could count on during a hectic move. A simple favor, watching over Anthony for the weekend. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything. February 21st, 2016. A day that should have been just another evening. But behind closed doors, something unspeakable was happening. Gloria sent a casual text. Anthony had fallen. Kids fall all the time, right? But here's the thing. This wasn't a scraped knee or a harmless tumble. It was the beginning of something far worse. This wasn't an accident. This was a slow, deliberate descent into horror. The bruises told the story. The pain etched into Anthony's tiny body was a silent scream for help that never came. By the time the truth surfaced, it was too late. The community, the city, even seasoned investigators, everyone was left reeling from the brutality of what had really happened. And if you think this was just a moment of poor judgment, think again. Gloria Fields wasn't some innocent bystander who lost control for a second. She had a record, a rap sheet that should have been a neon warning sign flashing, "Do not trust." 9 arrests, not for shoplifting or parking tickets. No, we're talking about drugs, violence, and a track record of neglect so severe she lost custody of her own children. And yet somehow, she was left alone with Anthony. Marta never saw it coming, and honestly, who would? Gloria played the part well, a friendly face, a helpful neighbor, a seemingly safe option. But predators don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they smile. By the time Marta realized who Gloria really was, the damage was irreversible. A mother's worst nightmare had unfolded in real time, and the person she had trusted most had destroyed everything. The fallout, unimaginable. Some betrayals leave scars, others leave something far worse. And as we peel back the layers of this case, one question lingers. How many times do the warning signs need to flash before we pay attention? Before we dive deeper, a huge thank you to all my incredible viewers and subscribers. Your support, through likes, shares, and comments, makes it possible to bring these stories to light. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. Now let's dig in, because this story, it only gets darker from here.
February 19th, 2016, a day that should have been just another ordinary Friday. But for 6-year-old Anthony, it was the beginning of something horrifying. His mother, Marta, left him in the care of Gloria Fields, a woman she trusted. That trust would prove to be a devastating mistake. By the next day, February 20th, things took a dark turn. Gloria wasn't spending the weekend watching cartoons with Anthony or playing games like any responsible babysitter. No, she was too busy getting high. Marijuana, harder substances, you name it, she was using it. Her mind was clouded, her judgment shattered, and the consequences unforgivable. That afternoon, she took Anthony out, not for a fun trip to the park, but to Buffalo Exchange. The store's bright lights and bustling shoppers couldn't mask the truth. Something was terribly wrong. People noticed. They saw the bruises, the marks, the undeniable signs of abuse. But no one stepped in, no concerned stranger, no frantic phone call to the authorities. Just a silent collective shrug. Maybe they thought, not my problem. Maybe they had seen too much of the world's ugliness to care. Either way, their inaction sealed Anthony's fate. By February 21st, it was already too late. Marta received a text from Gloria. Anthony fell. A simple message, a blatant lie. Anthony hadn't just fallen. He had been tortured. His tiny body was covered in wounds, evidence of a nightmare that had lasted for 2 agonizing days. This wasn't a case of neglect. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was relentless, calculated cruelty. Gloria Fields didn't just hurt Anthony, she unleashed a storm of violence on a defenseless child. She shook him with a force, each violent jolt a testament to her unhinged rage. His body, bruised, battered, and broken, told a story more horrifying than any words ever could. And just when you think it couldn't get any worse, it did. The abuse escalated to something so vile, so monstrous, that even the coldest hearts would shudder at the details. What happened next was beyond comprehension. It was evil in its purest form, and yet for 2 days the world just watched.
Gloria Fields didn't just cross the line, she obliterated it. She took a pencil and used it to commit an act so vile it's difficult to even put into words. The damage she inflicted on Anthony wasn't the result of a loss of control or a fleeting moment of rage. No, this was intentional, calculated, pure evil. For 2 agonizing days, Anthony's world was nothing but suffering. It wasn't a single act of abuse. It was a relentless assault, an escalating horror show where he was the unwilling star. The violence didn't simmer down. It built to a terrifying climax. And when she finally realized Anthony's tiny body couldn't take any more, she made a call. 911 paramedics arrived to find chaos. But one thing stood out: Gloria Fields. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't sobbing. She wasn't even pretending to be a distraught caregiver. Instead, she was eerily detached, as if she were watching the aftermath of a bad decision rather than the consequences of unimaginable cruelty. The emergency team worked frantically, but deep down, they knew. Anthony was already slipping away. Every second that passed was another they couldn't get back. The rush to Staten Island University Hospital felt endless, but it wouldn't have mattered if they'd had all the time in the world. By the time they arrived, Anthony's heart had already given up. His tiny body couldn't fight anymore. The official cause of death: cardiac arrest. But the medical examiner's findings would reveal something much worse. The autopsy was a horror story in itself. This wasn't a case of a child taking a fall. Anthony's body told the truth Gloria tried to hide. Bruises, broken bones, trauma so severe it was clear he had been brutally beaten. His head injuries alone were catastrophic. He had been shaken, thrown, and struck with such force that survival wasn't even an option. The brutality was staggering, and there was only one person responsible: Gloria Fields. At first, she clung to her lies. She blamed her meds, claimed she blacked out, anything to dodge the reality of what she had done. But the investigators weren't buying it. 40 hours. That's how long they pushed, questioned, and cornered her with the weight of her crimes. And eventually, the walls she built around her lies started to crumble. Then she cracked. Her confession came, but not in the way you might expect. No sobbing, no remorse, no desperate pleas for forgiveness. Just cold, detached reasoning. "I just wanted to inflict some pain on something else because I was in pain." She wasn't sorry. She wasn't horrified by what she had done. She simply justified it, as if Anthony had been nothing more than a punching bag for her own misery. A child, a helpless, trusting child, became the target of her rage, and in her twisted mind, that somehow made sense. The truth was out, but no confession, no trial, and no sentence could ever undo the nightmare that unfolded in that apartment. Anthony's story was one of innocence, stolen by a monster hiding in plain sight. And for that, there could never be true justice. Only the hope that monsters like Gloria Fields are never given the chance to strike again.
Gloria Fields sat in that courtroom, her face a mask of indifference, as if the weight of her actions hadn't even registered. The air was thick with tension, every eye fixed on her. She was no ordinary defendant, and this was no ordinary trial. As Anthony's family took the stand, their words were like daggers, each one a reminder of the precious life stolen, a pain that would never heal. But Gloria, she sat there like a statue, her cold, unblinking stare fixed ahead. Not a single tear. Not a hint of remorse, just silence. And in that silence, the gravity of the charges against her grew heavier. First-degree murder, aggravated assault, child endangerment, and criminal possession of a weapon. There was no escaping the mounting evidence: the bruises, the trauma, the brutality of what she'd done. As the details of her horrific actions were laid bare for the world to see, Gloria remained unmoved, a blank slate. The room buzzed with grief, but she was as still and silent as ever. Her defense team, however, had other plans. They grasped at any straw they could, even briefly flirting with the idea of an insanity plea, suggesting that her drug use had affected her judgment, but that too was quickly dismissed.
As the trial unfolded, it became painfully clear that Gloria's actions weren't the result of some fleeting impulse or a momentary loss of control. No, this was deliberate. It wasn't an outburst of anger gone wrong. It was calculated, cruel, and chilling. But Gloria's defense team wasn't ready to give up just yet. They scrambled for another angle, suggesting the police had mistreated her during the interrogation, claiming she'd been forced into confessing. But the judge wasn't having it. The evidence was too clear. Gloria's confession came after 40 hours of questioning, and nothing about her statements hinted at manipulation. It was pure truth, spilling from her lips. The truth about the horrors she had unleashed on an innocent child. When the judge finally delivered the sentence, 23 years to life, it felt almost anticlimactic. Some believed it was far too lenient for the monstrous acts she had committed. The room was thick with tension, and on one side Anthony's family sat, their faces etched with grief, frustration, and exhaustion. One of Anthony's relatives, his aunt, spoke to the press, her voice heavy with emotion. 23 years to life doesn't bring my nephew back. It doesn't give us the closure we need. But at least we know she'll never hurt another child again. The family's relief was tempered by the sting of injustice. After everything they'd been through, this sentence felt like a harsh reminder that Anthony's life, his tragic, violent end, didn't seem to matter enough to the justice system. As they left the courtroom, one of Anthony's cousins summed it up. "She took everything from us. We're left picking up the pieces, and 23 years doesn't change that." The sense of loss was undeniable. No matter how long Gloria stayed behind bars, it wouldn't bring Anthony back. No amount of time in prison could ever erase the trauma they would carry for the rest of their lives. The defense team tried to paint Gloria as a broken woman, someone crushed by life's burdens, reacting to years of pain and struggle. They revealed that she had lost custody of her children, and that seemed to spark something dark inside her. But no matter how tragic her own story was, it could never justify what she did to Anthony. His death was inexcusable, a brutal act of malice that no amount of emotional pain could explain away. Gloria's failed attempt at a defense wasn't lost on anyone. Her own history was unraveling before the court. Her unstable behavior, past arrests, and substance abuse all pointed to a woman who had long teetered on the edge. And yet it still didn't excuse the cruelty she inflicted on Anthony. The neighbors who lived near Gloria were quick to speak up, offering chilling insights into her erratic past. They described her as unpredictable, volatile even. A few remembered witnessing her tense, strange interactions with children, but most were too scared or too passive to intervene. One neighbor summed it up with a grim disbelief. "We all saw Gloria as a bit of a loner, but nobody ever thought she'd hurt a child. She was always talking about her struggles, but we never imagined it would go this far. No one ever imagined the depths of darkness she'd sink to."
Gloria seemed like she was on the verge of getting her life together. But then, something snapped. A neighbor who knew her from the block described how, despite her efforts to change, her relationships with her children were always strained. They used to visit her, but those visits were never filled with joy. "You could tell they were scared," one neighbor said. "It wasn't normal, but none of us thought she'd do something like this, not like that." The terror in their voice was palpable, but what if there had been warning signs all along? One neighbor suggested a chilling thought. There should be a system of awareness for people like her, those with a history of abuse. That way, no one else would fall victim to them. Unfortunately, it's clear that Gloria wasn't an isolated case. Studies show that individuals with a history of abuse, particularly those battling substance addiction, are much more likely to repeat their violent behaviors. In fact, research from the National Institute of Justice reveals a staggering statistic. 68 to 80% of people involved in child abuse or domestic violence cases are likely to reoffend. That's not a typo, it's a pattern. And let's not forget the horrifying connection between substance abuse and violence. The National Institute on Drug Abuse reports that 40 to 80% of people with a history of child abuse also suffer from addiction, a toxic cocktail to say the least. But it doesn't stop there. Mental health issues make the mix even more volatile. According to the American Psychological Association, conditions like depression, personality disorders, and PTSD, commonly found in abusers, only raise the chances of violent behavior. This sheds new light on Gloria's case. Without proper intervention or treatment, people like her battle in substance abuse and mental health struggles are likely to repeat their destructive patterns. The sad truth? This could have been avoided with the right help. Gloria's actions didn't come out of nowhere. They were a symptom of a much larger, far darker problem. And unfortunately, she's not the only one.
The damage Gloria caused? Well, it's beyond devastating, especially when children are involved. In fact, the Bureau of Justice Statistics reveals a chilling truth. 70% of offenders convicted of violent crimes like abuse are likely to re-offend within just 5 years if they don't receive the right treatment. That statistic should send a cold shiver down your spine. And in Gloria's case, the potential for repeated harm was there, looming over everyone. So let me ask you, was Gloria a victim of her own pain and brokenness? Or did she deliberately choose to hurt an innocent child? Could she have been saved, or was she simply too far gone? I want to know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Was 23 years to life truly enough to pay for what she did? Did justice really serve the victim here, or did it just make a weak attempt? If you think these stories deserve to be heard, if you believe in shedding light on the truth, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support, it makes all the difference. Together, we can make sure the voices of the victims are never silenced. And remember to hit that bell icon, because you don't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for being here, and as always, take care.
I never had any interest in any form of cannibalism.
On December 15, 1999, Great Falls police cracked open a case that would haunt them forever. They secured a search warrant for a man whose mind was a twisted labyrinth of horror. What they found inside his home made even the most seasoned officers sick to their stomachs. A journal filled with coded recipes. But these weren't for your average Sunday dinner. Names like Little Boy Pot Pie, French Fried Kid, and Little Boy Stew were scrawled across the pages. At first, investigators thought it was some sick fantasy, but deep down, they knew something horrifying had happened in that kitchen. And the worst part? They'd been circling this monster for years. The nightmare began on a freezing morning. February 6, 1996. 10-year-old 𝐂𝐫𝐳𝐭𝐞𝐧𝐭, known to friends as Zach, was the kind of kid who made people smile just by walking into a room. Smart, social, full of life. He lived on 4th Street North. Every morning, he and his friends gathered outside the school to play before class. But on that particular morning, Zach never made it to school. Dressed in a blue denim jacket with green sleeves, a football jersey with his name in gold letters, and black high tops, he set out on his usual walk. 6 blocks, a quick shortcut through an alley. Simple, routine, safe. Except that day, something waited for him in the shadows. A light dusting of snow covered the ground as Zach kicked around a small ball of ice, unaware that someone was watching him. Parked in the alley, an off-white 4-door sedan sat idling. Inside, a figure remained motionless. Zach was smart. If anything had seemed off, he would have changed course. But this was his neighborhood. Nothing felt out of place. Then somewhere between 6th Street and 7th, he vanished. At first, no one panicked. His friends assumed he was sick. The school called home, only to hear what no parent ever wants to hear. Zach was missing. News spread like wildfire. A child disappearing on his way to school? It was unthinkable. Great Falls had its share of crime, but nothing like this. The search began immediately. Hundreds of volunteers, law enforcement, and rescue teams scoured the area, focusing on the 400 block where Zach was last seen. Then came the first gut punch. Searchers found a pair of jeans stuffed in a dumpster near the alley, a blue denim jacket in a nearby field. Both matched Zach's description. Witnesses started coming forward. A man had seen Zach standing in the alley, as if waiting for someone. Another recalled an off-white sedan nearly running him over. Then, the most chilling account yet, a family of 3 whose apartment overlooked the alley reported seeing Zach crying while an obese man followed a few feet behind him. At 7:45 a.m., another witness identified the man. He wore a navy blue police jacket and took out the trash near a dumpster. He stood completely still as Zach unknowingly walked into danger. That man was Nathaniel Barjona, a name that should have sent alarms blaring long before Zach disappeared. Barjona had a rap sheet soaked in red flags, disturbing encounters with children, violent fantasies, and a past that screamed predator. But somehow he was still free. And now with Zach missing and those horrific recipes in his journal, one horrifying question loomed over the investigation. Was Zach just another name on the menu? The police had to find out, fast. Nathaniel Barjona was born on February 15, 1957, in Worcester, Massachusetts. Back then, he was known as David Paul Brown, the youngest of 3 siblings. From the moment he entered the world, something seemed off. As an infant, he had an insatiable appetite, crying for more food even when he could barely keep his eyes open. His muscles were weak, his weight made him immobile, and to top it off, he loathed being touched. 3 weeks in, doctors diagnosed him with hydrocephalus, a condition where excess fluid builds up in the brain, leading to pressure and potential damage. He survived, but it seemed like something inside him had already started to break. By the time he turned 3, the Brown family packed up and moved to Lantana, Florida. Nathaniel spent his early years there, while his father, Philip Brown, worked as a heavy equipment mechanic. Philip was strict, maybe too strict, and raising Nathaniel was no easy task. The boy wasn't just difficult, he was downright bizarre. He had no real bond with his siblings, but he did enjoy stealing from them, and from other kids too. His father saw this as a sign of kleptomania, a compulsion to steal. But Philip had an additional, deeply misguided concern. He believed stealing was somehow linked to homosexuality, so he handled it the only way he knew how: discipline, served up with a thick leather belt. Whether it was the beatings, the brain condition, or something far darker lurking beneath the surface, Nathaniel was becoming unrecognizable. He developed disturbing habits, like picking at his skin until it bled, then chewing on the scabs. Sometimes he even swallowed them. His classmates were horrified, and the school called his mother multiple times. But her reaction? Indifference. It was as if she either didn't notice or didn't care. Then came 1964. The Browns had moved back to Worcester, and 7-year-old Nathaniel decided to test just how much he could get away with. He lured a girl into his basement, promising to show her a Ouija board he had received as a gift. What she didn't know was that the board wasn't meant to contact spirits. It was bait. As soon as she stepped inside, he wrapped his hands around her throat. The girl's screams shattered the silence, and his mother rushed downstairs just in time to stop him. No one called the police. No one talked about it. And Nathaniel, he walked away like nothing had happened. Fast forward to 1973, and Nathaniel, now a teenager, was getting bolder. He put on a police-style jacket, cut out words from magazines to create a ransom-style note, and tried to lure 2 young boys into a cemetery. He offered them $20 and a surprise. The boys, thankfully, had enough sense to refuse. Their mother was furious but chose not to press charges, believing he needed psychiatric help instead of jail time. She had no idea that from that moment on, every time Nathaniel put on a police jacket, a child's life was in danger. By March of 1975, Nathaniel was 18 and barely hanging on to high school. One morning, dressed in his now infamous police uniform, he spotted a young boy walking to school. His predatory instincts kicked in. He abducted the boy, Richard O'Connor, and threw him into his car. But fate had other plans. A sharp-eyed neighbor witnessed the abduction and called the police. Soon, patrol cars were on the lookout. They found Nathaniel's vehicle parked, and when backup arrived, officers ordered him to step out. Inside the car, Richard O'Connor lay motionless, bloodied, and barely clinging to life. Nathaniel had been caught red-handed, but this was just the beginning of a case that would unearth horrors no one was prepared for. Nathaniel wasn't just spiraling, he was plummeting. By the time officers found him, he had soiled himself, a sight that perfectly summed up his unraveling state. Arrested on the spot, you'd think this was the end of his reign of terror. But no, he walked free on probation, like some kind of sick joke. During his so-called rehabilitation, he took a detour to Hartford, Connecticut, where he played dress-up as a cop again. This time he abducted a young girl. But mid-assault, something unexpected happened. She started convulsing and vomiting. That wasn't part of his plan. Panicking, he dumped her on the sidewalk and sped off. Unfortunately for him, a witness jotted down his license plate. Arrest followed. Justice, right? Not exactly. Somehow the details of this attack never made it to his probation officer. The system, in all its wisdom, officially freed him in May 1976, even throwing in a thank you note for his cooperation. If he wasn't already deranged, this was the final push. On September 24, 1977, Nathaniel was back to his twisted ways. Outside the White City Cinemas in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, two boys exited, laughing and carefree, until they ran into him. He flashed an FBI badge, claiming he was undercover, and lured them into his car. They had no idea they were walking into a nightmare. He drove them to a remote location, handcuffed them, and then things took a horrifying turn. Using his massive 375-pound frame, he repeatedly jumped on one of the boys' chests. He only stopped when he was convinced the kid was dead. But he wasn't done. He left the first boy for dead on the roadside and drove off with the second, locked in the trunk. But fate intervened. The first boy, somehow still alive, regained consciousness and got help. Within an hour, police tracked Nathaniel down and rescued the second boy from the trunk. This time, there was no escaping punishment. He was sentenced to 18 to 20 years at the Massachusetts Correctional Institution in Concord. The system finally realized it had no clue how to handle him. Conversations with prison psychologists revealed an unsettling truth. His fantasies were getting worse. Authorities transferred him to Bridgewater State Hospital, a facility for sexually dangerous offenders. This wasn't a prison sentence. This was an indefinite stay. Then, in a bizarre twist, Nathaniel legally changed his name to Nathaniel Benjamin Levi Bar Jonah in March 1984. Why? His explanations were as twisted as his mind. One day he claimed he wanted to experience discrimination as a Jew. Another time, he insisted he was embracing his Jewish heritage. In reality, his ancestry was Scandinavian. The only thing Jewish about him was his name on paper. That same year, against all logic and reason, he won a parole hearing. Two psychologists, handpicked by the defense, testified that he was no longer a threat. The prosecution failed to prove otherwise. In 1991, Superior Court Judge Walter Steele ordered his release. Due to administrative delays, it took until July, but eventually he walked free. Bridgewater's own psychiatrist had warned that his violent fantasies hadn't faded, they had intensified. Nathaniel himself admitted that his strongest desires revolved around torture and sadistic acts. The system had unleashed a monster, and soon the world would learn just how dangerous he truly was. Nathaniel was back on the streets, and within a month it was clear. The only thing that had changed in prison was his name. On August 9, 1991, outside a post office in Oxford, Massachusetts, he spotted a young boy alone in a parked car. Seeing an easy target, Nathaniel climbed inside and, at 300 pounds, crushed the child under his weight. Just as things were about to take a darker turn, the boy's mother appeared. She ran toward the car, screaming. Nathaniel panicked and bolted from the scene. But it was too late. Law enforcement quickly identified him and took him into custody. During interrogation, he made a chilling confession. He had planned to kill the boy. And yet, despite this, he got off easy. In exchange for a guilty plea, the Worcester County District Attorney gave him a 2-year probation. The brilliant solution? Send him back to Montana to live with his mother. Because if you can't deal with a monster, just make it someone else's problem. For a few years, Nathaniel seemed to disappear from the radar, but the calm wouldn't last. When young Zach Ramsey vanished, Detective Bill Bellucci took over the case. Given a list of known sex offenders, he immediately noticed something off. It didn't include Nathaniel. Instead of blindly trusting the system, Bellucci followed his instincts. Witnesses had seen Nathaniel lurking in an alley near where Zach was last spotted. Bellucci knew he was onto something and fought for a search warrant for Nathaniel's home, but the courts denied every request. Meanwhile, Nathaniel conveniently moved out of his mother's house, staying one step ahead. For 3 years, it was a game of cat and mouse between him and Bellucci. Nathaniel exploited legal loopholes, slipping away time and again. But Bellucci had spent years studying him. He knew this man wasn't just dangerous. He was an outlier, a case that didn't fit the usual mold. Then on December 13, 1999, the break finally came. Bellucci had been keeping tabs on Nathaniel and spotted him lurking outside an elementary school for the 3rd time in 1 week. If that wasn't bad enough, Nathaniel was dressed for the part. Dark blue jacket, knit cap, 2 cans of pepper spray, a toy gun, and a badge. The pieces clicked into place. Bellucci moved in, arresting him for impersonating an officer and carrying a concealed weapon. 2 days later, a judge finally approved a search warrant, not for murder, but for anything related to impersonating law enforcement. It was a technicality, but it was enough to get inside Nathaniel's home. What they found was disturbing. Among his possessions, coats designed to look like law enforcement uniforms, toy badges, a stun gun, and a security enforcement baseball cap. But that was just the warm-up. In the kitchen, investigators noticed something odd, a pull string leading to the ceiling. Following it led them to 2 albums. Inside, cutouts of children, disturbing documents on knots and bondage, and an article about autoerotic asphyxiation. And then came the biggest revelation. Bellucci and his team dug into Nathaniel's movements and found that on February 6, 1996, the day Zach disappeared, Nathaniel hadn't gone to work. His mother and brother had been out of town for a funeral, leaving Nathaniel alone, with access to her off-white 1978 Toyota Corolla. The same kind of car witnesses saw near the alley where Zach vanished. This discovery triggered another search warrant. This time, they found something even more horrifying. A list titled Lake Webster. It contained 54 names. The first few were Nathaniel's early victims from the 1970s. The last name, Zachary Ramsey. Next to it, one word, died. If that wasn't enough, investigators found 3,500 photographs of children and undeveloped film. Among the images, Nathaniel himself, posing with 3 unidentified boys. For years, Nathaniel had evaded justice, slipping through the cracks of the system, but this time, there would be no loopholes, no technicalities. The walls were closing in. And Bellucci? He was ready to make sure Nathaniel never saw freedom again. Detectives combed through Nathaniel's belongings, uncovering a series of journals filled with bizarre symbols, some sort of coded script. These cryptic writings were immediately flagged for decryption. What they later revealed would be beyond disturbing. Meanwhile, investigators interviewed Nathaniel's former roommates. One of them recalled seeing a set of clothes that looked eerily similar to what Zachary Ramsey had been last seen wearing. Another had stumbled upon a pair of blood-stained gloves. Then came the most chilling revelation. In a casual conversation, Nathaniel mentioned Zach's name out of nowhere. He didn't just reference the missing boy, he made a claim. Zach would never be found, he said, because his remains had been dismembered and scattered. Just another friendly chat with Nathaniel. A month later, the journals were cracked. It wasn't just any code, it was a cookbook, but not your grandma's collection of casserole recipes. The titles were grotesque, laced with a sinister pattern. Little Pot Pie, French Fried, and Little D. Suddenly, the police weren't just dealing with a kidnapper or an abuser. They were staring at the work of something far worse. As they dug deeper, officers uncovered a massive stained section of plywood in Nathaniel's garage. Bleach had been used in an attempt to wipe away whatever had soaked into it, but the surface had also been hacked repeatedly with a meat cleaver. A forensic test with luminol revealed a word once written in blood, TAA. Investigators linked it to James Taya, a boy found murdered in New Hampshire in 1973. The pieces of Nathaniel's dark past were falling into place, one horror at a time. Then came another bizarre detail. In the days following Zach's disappearance, Nathaniel hosted a cookout for his neighbors, serving what he proudly called deer burgers. Except there was one tiny problem. Nathaniel didn't own a gun. He didn't have a hunting license. And according to his credit card records, he hadn't bought food in an entire month after Zach went missing. Suddenly, those deer burgers weren't sounding so appetizing. Things only got darker. Hidden inside a meat grinder, officers found strands of what looked like human hair. An excavation at one of Nathaniel's former residences uncovered 21 bone fragments belonging to a young boy between the ages of 8 and 13, but none of them matched Zach. In fact, DNA testing confirmed they belonged to two different African-American boys, victims whose names to this day remain unknown. Nathaniel had spent his life hunting, preying on the vulnerable like it was sport. But when the law finally caught up with him, justice was a mess of technicalities and loopholes. Despite mounting evidence, the strongest case against him, 𝐂𝐨𝐬𝐿 𝐁𝐫𝐜𝐜𝐡𝐢𝐯, was slipping through their fingers. Zach's mother refused to believe her son was gone, clinging to the hope sparked by a psychic who told her Zach was alive and living in Italy. Her denial wasn't just heartbreaking, it was a gift to the defense. Without her cooperation, the case crumbled and the murder charges were dropped. With that door slammed shut, detectives turned their focus elsewhere. Among the names found in Nathaniel's disturbing list, two boys were traced back to the same apartment building he once lived in. They also appeared in some of the undeveloped film found in his home. One of them, now older, came forward with a horrifying confession. Nathaniel had molested them during a so-called sleepover. But the other, he visited Nathaniel in jail, wrote him letters, and even defended him, claiming he was a friend and had never done anything wrong. The level of psychological manipulation at play was staggering. Then came a face from the past. Mary Patron, who had been just 6 years old when Nathaniel assaulted her, recognized him instantly. She didn't hesitate. She didn't second guess. Unfortunately, the law had already failed her. The statute of limitations had expired, meaning Nathaniel would never be charged for what he did to her. Despite years of evasion and legal technicalities working in his favor, Nathaniel's luck ran out. In the end, he was sentenced to 130 years behind bars. No parole, no way out. For many, it was too little, too late. But at the very least, the hunt was over. Nathaniel would never walk free again. The monster finally falls, but not before taking his secrets to the grave. In 2008, Nathaniel was found unconscious in his prison cell. A heart attack. His body had finally given up after years of declining health. But that wasn't the real tragedy. The real horror was that he died without ever revealing the full extent of his crimes. Nathaniel slipped through the cracks of the system for decades. His past was littered with warnings, yet authorities failed to connect the dots. His probation officer had no clue about his 1977 crime. A court in 1999 remained oblivious to his history in Massachusetts. This wasn't just a case of oversight, this was negligence on a catastrophic scale. And because of that negligence, countless children suffered. Despite his mother's desperate refusal to believe it, a judge legally declared Zachary Ramsey dead in 2011. But what if she was right? What if Zach really is alive somewhere? If so, he'd be in his 30s today, living under a different name, possibly unaware of the chaos left in his wake. Nathaniel was a predator, one who got chance after chance to destroy lives. He spent 11 years in a mental institution, only to attack again within a month of release. Yet somehow, the system let him walk free over and over again. So here's the real question. Have we learned from cases like this? Or are there still monsters lurking, slipping through legal loopholes, waiting for their next victim? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this video gripping, hit that like button, subscribe, and share. We've got more chilling stories coming your way. Until next time, stay safe and stay vigilant. What kind of mother kills her own child? Sounds unthinkable, right? But for 5-year-old Maha, it was a tragic reality. Maha was bright, full of life, loved by everyone, and then gone, just like that. The way it happened? Cold, calculated, almost inhuman. Her mother, Alexis Nelson, once thought adoption was the best option. But when that didn't work out, she made a decision that no one saw coming. Instead of finding another way, she ended Maha's life. And then, she tried to wipe away every trace, as if she could erase what she did. But the truth always finds a way out. Maha was just 5, tiny frame, big personality. She was one of those kids who could walk into a room and instantly own it. Full of energy, always smiling, always laughing. You couldn't be around her without feeling that contagious joy. whether she was running around with friends or making silly faces on video calls with her grandma. Maha had this way of making life feel lighter. Those video calls? Pure gold. Giggles, warmth, and moments that should have been just the beginning of a lifetime of memories. But then, gone. Just like that. In an instant, her future wasn't hers anymore. Stolen, and the worst part, the person who was supposed to protect her didn't. Now instead of growing up, Maha became a memory, a story told with heartbreak, a reminder of how cruel reality can be. Alexis Nelson wasn't always this distant, unrecognizable version of herself. Once she was just a young woman with dreams, simple ones like stability, happiness, and maybe a life that didn't feel like a constant uphill battle. But life doesn't always cooperate. And for Alexis, it never really had. She lived far from family, struggled financially, and carried the weight of a past she never talked about. She had learned early on that the safest way to get through life was to keep people at a distance. Ask for help? No chance. Alexis wasn't the kind to lean on anyone. She was the kind to endure. And then there were the fears. To her, the world outside was unpredictable, dangerous, strangers, familiar faces. It didn't matter. She saw threats where others saw ordinary life, and so she kept Maha close, convinced that if she controlled everything, she could keep her safe. But isolation doesn't just shut the world out. It can also lock something much darker in. The more you learned about Alexis, the clearer it became. She was terrified of being judged, terrified of being abandoned. So she did the only thing that made sense to her. She pushed people away before they had the chance to leave. Call it self-preservation, call it self-sabotage. Either way, it was a lonely way to live. But here's the thing, whatever pain she carried, whatever trauma shaped her, none of it could justify what she did next. Because at some point, fear stops being an excuse, and choices start defining who you really are. Then there was Terrell Hobbs, Maha's father. He was always there, just in the background. He wasn't the perfect dad, but he wasn't absent either. A professional fighter by trade, he knew how to take a hit. He just didn't expect one to come from Alexis. They weren't together, but he still tried. FaceTimes, check-ins, whatever little moments he could get. But slowly the calls stopped being answered. The texts went unread. And before he knew it, Alexis had shut him out completely. The distance between him and Maha wasn't just physical anymore. It was intentional. And that kind of hurt lingers. For 2 whole years, Terrell had no contact with his daughter. No visits, no calls, nothing. The last time he saw Maha, she was still wobbling around like a tiny drunk person, just learning to walk. Now, she was growing up without him, and he had no way in. He tried, he really did. But every call went unanswered, every message ignored. It was like screaming into a void, except the void occasionally left him unread. The worst part? He wanted to be there. He wanted to raise his daughter, but Alexis had already made that decision for him. Then the tragedy hit, and suddenly, Terrell wasn't just grieving. He was drowning in guilt. He wasn't there when Maha needed him most, and no matter how hard he tried, he'd never be able to change that. Now let's talk about A'ja Whitley Shaw, Maha's grandmother. She lived miles away, but still did her best to stay involved. And lately, she wasn't liking what she was seeing. Alexis had always been a little distant, but this was different. Her messages became vague, her calls less frequent. And then there were the red flags, big, waving in the wind. Someone should probably look into this, red flags. The biggest? Alexis casually mentioning rehoming Maha. Rehoming, like she was a puppy that got too big for the apartment. A'ja knew something was wrong. She just didn't know how bad it really was. It all started with unease. But unease has a way of turning into regret when no one listens in time. A'ja Whitley Shaw knew something was off. At first it was just a feeling, that gut instinct that gnaws at you when things don't add up. She had always tried to stay connected with her daughter, Alexis Nelson, and her granddaughter, Maha. But lately, Alexis had been acting weird. The messages got shorter, the calls became rare, and then there were the bizarre offhand comments, like the time Alexis casually mentioned rehoming Maha. Rehoming, like she was a Craigslist couch that didn't fit the new decor. At first, Asia tried to brush it off as a misunderstanding. Maybe Alexis was just overwhelmed. Maybe she didn't mean it the way it sounded. But when she pressed for details, Alexis had nothing. No agency name, no paperwork, just vague, unsettling excuses. That's when concern turned into full-blown panic. On May 30th, 2023, Asia did something no grandmother should ever have to do. She called the Aurora Police Department and asked for a welfare check on Maha. She couldn't ignore the alarm bells ringing in her head anymore. When officers knocked on Alexis's door, she greeted them with a story so neat, so rehearsed that it immediately raised suspicion. She claimed she had placed Maha for adoption through an agency called Adoptions with Love. A touching name, really. Very Hallmark. To make it all seem legit, she even handed the cops a phone number. Confident. Too confident. Like she'd planned this conversation in front of a mirror. But here's the thing. Good lies feel natural. Bad lies feel scripted. And something about Alexis's story just wasn't clicking. The officers had a bad feeling. And they were right. The officers didn't waste any time. They dialed the number Alexis gave them, expecting to confirm her adoption story and move on. But instead of validation, they got confusion. Adoptions with Love? The agency rep repeated, clearly puzzled. Yeah, we've never heard of an Alexis Nelson or a Maha. And just like that, Alexis's neatly packaged excuse fell apart. Now, the detectives weren't just suspicious. They were certain. Something wasn't adding up, and Alexis was standing right in the middle of it with a half-baked story and zero receipts. Sensing the shift, Alexis pivoted. New plan, new story. This time she pulled a name out of nowhere. Janet Dunn. Allegedly, Janet was the one who had helped her find an adoption agency. Okay, so where can we find Janet Dunn? The detectives asked. No clue. Which agency did she work with? Can't remember. Any emails, documents, literally anything? Oh, I threw all that away. Didn't want my family looking for Maha. Yeah. That's when the officers knew. This wasn't just a weird misunderstanding. Then came the real kicker. When they searched Alexis's phone, they expected to find something. An email, a message, a single piece of evidence that supported her claims. But no. What they found was nothing. No adoption inquiries, no paper trail, and the most chilling part, no pictures of Maha. It was as if Alexis had hit the delete button on her daughter's entire existence. On paper, online, and possibly in real life. At this point, the detectives weren't just suspicious. They were certain. Alexis wasn't just hiding something. She was burying it 6 feet deep and hoping no one would dig it up. But that's exactly what they were about to do. They started with a background check, hoping to find any trace of this so-called adoption. But guess what? Nothing. No records, no paperwork, not even a shady Craigslist ad offering a free slightly used child. Alexis's story wasn't just falling apart. It was crumbling like a sandcastle in a hurricane. But the real bombshell came when they checked her phone. Among the usual texts, calls, and oddly high number of food delivery orders, something else stood out. Her Google search history. 2 searches in particular made the detectives' stomachs drop. Can you overdose from melatonin? Can you overdose from Xanax? And that's when the case took a very dark turn. At this point, suspicion had officially clocked out and been replaced by certainty. This wasn't some tragic accident. This wasn't a mother making a desperate decision. This was something else entirely. And the cops? They knew it. But trying to get a straight answer out of Alexis was like asking a politician to just answer yes or no. A complete waste of time. Every time they pushed, she dodged. Every time they confronted her, she twisted the story. Every time they got close to the truth, she ran in the opposite direction, like an Olympic sprinter, but for lying. And just when it seemed like they were hitting a dead end, in walked Nick Bagel. Now Nick, he wasn't a cop. He wasn't a detective. He wasn't trying to solve a crime. He was just a guy doing his job, a maintenance worker making his rounds, checking apartments, probably counting down the minutes until his lunch break. But on May 5th, 2023, his casual inspection of Alexis's apartment changed everything. From the moment he walked in, something felt off. Then he noticed Maha's bedroom door was locked. Not just locked, rigged. Someone had tied a string from the bedroom door to the bathroom door on the other side, making it impossible to open. Now, Nick wasn't an expert in crime scene investigations, but he'd seen enough horror movies to know that when you stumble upon a locked room with makeshift booby traps, it's never a good sign. At first, Nick Bagel thought he was just dealing with another weird apartment situation. You know, leaky faucets, busted AC, maybe a tenant who definitely wasn't getting their security deposit back. But then things got real weird. He could hear a TV playing inside Maha's room. Not crying, not laughter, not the usual sounds of a kid's bedroom. Just a TV. That's when Nick made the call. Time to open the door. Except there was a problem. The door wasn't just locked. It was tied shut with a string. Now, if you walk into an apartment and find a door rigged shut, Home Alone style, you turn around and leave. But Nick, he was just trying to do his job. So he started cutting the string, and just as he was about to figure out what the heck was going on, "Get out!" Alexis's voice boomed through a baby monitor. At this point, Nick decided, you know what? I don't get paid enough for this. His gut told him something was seriously wrong. The kind of wrong that makes your stomach twist in knots long after you've left the scene. And oh boy, was he right. The investigation blows wide open. Detectives weren't messing around anymore. The inconsistencies in Alexis's story, her missing kid, and now this, it was time to go in. With a search warrant in hand, Detective Jacob Schwartz and his team stormed back into Alexis's Aurora, Colorado apartment. And what they found? Absolutely chilling. Maha's room was empty. No bed, no toys, no clothes, no proof a kid had ever lived there. Just a dirty, stained carpet and the eerie feeling that something terrible had happened. But it wasn't just Maha's room. The entire apartment was wiped clean of her existence. No family photos, no kids' clothes in the laundry, not even a finger painting stuck to the fridge. It was as if Alexis had digitally deleted Maha from existence. And speaking of digital footprints, the detectives seized Alexis's phone. They expected something, a text, a call log, a single photo of the daughter she supposedly loved. But what did they find? Nothing, not a single picture of Maha, not one moment of her existence captured. And that's when reality started to sink in. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just abandonment. This was something much, much darker. And Alexis, she was running out of lies. At first, the patio looked normal. A couple of dusty chairs, some neglected plants barely clinging to life, and the classic "I swear I'll clean this up next weekend" pile of old boxes. But then, the smell hit them. And let me tell you, this wasn't your usual "something died in the back of the fridge" smell. This was something way worse. Detectives felt their stomachs turn inside out. They followed the stench, eyes scanning every inch of the patio, until one of them spotted it, a utility closet shoved in the corner. And the second they cracked it open, boom, the smell hit 10 times harder. Inside, buried under random junk, was a large plastic bag. Now let's be real. When detectives find a bag that smells like death, they already know it's not going to be a bag of expired takeout. With hands steady but hearts racing, they peeled back the plastic. And that's when the horror set in. Bones, charred, blackened, almost unrecognizable. But there was no doubt. It was Maha. Reality hits like a freight train. Detective Schwartz had seen some messed up things in his career. Murders, cover-ups, cases that made even the most hardened officers question humanity. But this was on a whole different level of messed up. He stood there frozen, staring into that plastic bag of pure nightmare fuel. Detective Roberts, normally the guy who could joke about anything, just turned away. His jaw clenched so tight it looked like he might snap a tooth. And Schwartz? Well, he just stood there, trying real hard to remember why he even became a cop in the first place. Because this wasn't just another crime scene. This was the kind of thing that sticks with you forever. A mother's love? Yeah, right. The real kicker? This wasn't some random psycho. This was a mother. The one person who was supposed to love, protect, and, at the very least, not burn her own child like she was trying to delete a bad email. The air in the apartment felt heavier, like the walls themselves knew they had been keeping one hell of a secret. The crime scene team worked in silence, carefully bagging what was left of Maha. And as they did, the detectives couldn't help but wonder, what goes through someone's head when they decide, yeah, this is the best way to handle things? What was Alexis thinking? Actually, scratch that. Was she even thinking at all? DNA test? Yeah, we already know. Of course, the remains were sent off for official identification. But let's be real. Everyone in that room already knew. This was Maha. And Alexis? Yeah, she was officially out of lies to tell. The horror show was just getting started. Burned remains? That was just the opening act. The real horror? That came when the coroner tried to figure out how Maha died. Because the fire wasn't necessarily what killed her. Asphyxiation? Poison? A good old-fashioned case of, I don't want to be a mom anymore? Homicide? Nobody knew. And that made things even worse. Because when you can't even tell how someone was killed, you know the killer went above and beyond to cover their tracks. Alexis didn't just try to erase Maha. She hit the permanent delete button and cleared her trash folder. Not a missing person case anymore. A murder case. The detectives had their confirmation now. Maha wasn't missing. She was dead. And Alexis? She wasn't just a struggling mom with a bad alibi anymore. She was a full-blown horror movie villain. The kind of person you expect to see in a Netflix true crime documentary with an ominous piano soundtrack. But what really happened? How far had she gone? And more importantly, how many more skeletons, or, in this case, charred remains, were hiding in Alexis's metaphorical closet? The clock was ticking. While the lab geeks in white coats ran every possible test, the detectives were stuck waiting. Waiting for answers. Waiting for Alexis to slip up. Waiting for the truth to finally crawl out from whatever dark, messed up hole it was hiding in. Because this wasn't just about what happened. It was about why. Why does a mother wake up one day and think, you know what? I'd rather commit a felony than just be a decent parent? And more importantly, how long had this been coming? One thing was for sure. Alexis had tried really hard to rewrite the ending of this story. But now? Now it was the detectives' turn to take the pen. The curtain falls on Alexis Nelson, but not before one last act, May 31st, 2023. The day Alexis Nelson's I'm a Loving Mother performance finally flopped. The cops had spent days stitching together the gruesome truth. And now, it was time for Alexis to take center stage, in handcuffs. Her new titles: child abuse resulting in death, tampering with a deceased body, attempting to influence a public servant, aka being a monster trying and failing to cover it up. Thinking she was smarter than the law, spoiler alert, she wasn't. From free woman to mugshot in 60 seconds, the moment was cinematic. The detectives, stone-faced, the handcuffs extra tight, the reality undeniable. No more excuses, no more crocodile tears, no more, but I'm the victim here. Alexis was officially a prison-bound psychopath, and as she was marched out of her apartment, there was only one thing left to decide. Would she go for the classic stoic murderer look, or break out the crying Karen special? Hint, she went full, why is this happening to me mode. Meanwhile, in the tragedy department, Maha's father, Terrell Hobbs, wasn't handling it well. The man had been cut out of Maha's life for 2 years, and now, the woman he once trusted had turned their daughter into a true crime headline. The emotions were a blender of rage, guilt, and heartbreak. Because where was he when Maha needed saving? The weight of that question would haunt him forever. The show's not over yet. The detectives weren't celebrating just yet. Arresting Alexis was just the opening act. Now came the real work. Building a case so airtight that even Alexis's best attempt at courtroom dramatics wouldn't save her. Because this wasn't just about making an arrest. This was about justice for Maha. And the people who failed her? They were going to have to answer for it. Guilt, grief, and a whole lot of questions. Terrell Hobbs was drowning in what-ifs. Should he have fought harder to stay in Maha's life? Could he have seen this coming? Was there a moment, a single phone call, a visit, A legal battle that could have stopped this? But guilt is a merciless thing. It makes you feel responsible for things you never had control over. And the harshest truth of all, no amount of regret could bring Maha back, a grandmother's worst nightmare. Asia Whitley Shaw, Maha's grandmother, had tried to be in her life. She had made the calls, sent the messages, and fought for moments with her granddaughter. And now, she was standing in a world where Maha no longer existed. Learning that her granddaughter had been burned beyond recognition was like taking a sledgehammer to the soul. But the real horror? Knowing that the monster responsible was her own daughter, the same little girl she had once tucked in at night, the same child she had raised. Asia had failed to recognize the darkness growing inside Alexis, and now she would never forgive herself. The defense tries a plot twist. Alexis's lawyers had their own tragic backstory ready. They painted her as a broken woman, scarred by a traumatic past, overwhelmed by motherhood, and gripped by the irrational belief that no one could care for Maha like she could. In their version, Alexis wasn't a murderer. She was a victim, someone who had simply snapped under pressure, a woman who had been too scared, too lost, too damaged to do the right thing. But the prosecution wasn't buying it. Yes, Alexis had a difficult past. Yes, she had struggled. Yes, life had been unfair to her. But here's the thing, millions of people have trauma, millions of people have painful childhoods, and yet they don't incinerate their kids. Alexis had options. She could have asked for help. She could have reached out. She could have made better choices. Instead, she chose murder. And no amount of sad storytelling was going to erase that. A mother's betrayal. Alexis Nelson had options. She had a way out. She had a safety net. But instead of reaching for help, she reached for violence. The prosecution wasn't buying the sob story. Alexis didn't just snap. She didn't panic and make a mistake. This was a choice, a deliberate and calculated decision. She could have placed Maha in a safe home. She could have called someone, anyone. She could have done better, but she didn't. And now she was facing the consequences. Justice or just a deal? The case reached its breaking point on June 12, 2023. Alexis stood before the court, knowing her life was about to change forever. For weeks, the legal battle had been a war zone of shock, grief, and overwhelming evidence. And then in a move that stunned everyone, Alexis pleaded guilty, second-degree murder, tampering with a deceased body, attempting to influence a public servant. But here's where things got messy. The first-degree murder charge? Dropped. The child abuse resulting in death charge? Gone. Why? A plea deal. A deal that would bring closure to the case. But at what cost? The fallout, Terrell Hobbs sat in the courtroom, numb. This woman had killed his daughter. This woman had burned Maha's body. This woman had lied, manipulated, and destroyed lives. And now, she was getting a deal? It didn't sit right. It didn't feel like justice. Because no matter how many years Alexis spent behind bars, Maha was never coming back. A sentence that couldn't heal. Alexis Nelson took a life. No plea deal could change that. No legal ruling could erase what she had done. But the legal system had spoken. Judge Joseph Whitfield delivered the final blow. 48 years for second-degree murder. 24 years for tampering with Maha's remains. 12 years for trying to manipulate investigators. A total of 84 years. A lifetime behind bars. The courtroom was silent. For Maha's family, the sentence was something. Not justice, not closure, just something. Alexis would rot in prison, but Maha, she was gone. And no number of years, trials, or verdicts could change that. The unanswered question. The case was over, but one question remained. How did it come to this? Alexis had a past, a history of pain, a mind fractured by trauma. But did that excuse her? Absolutely not. She had choices, she had options, she had help. Instead, she chose violence. She chose to erase Maha, not because she had no way out, but because in the end, she never looked for one. A life stolen too soon. Maha Hobbs should have had a future, a life filled with love, laughter, and joy. Instead, her story was cut short. She was loved. She was cherished. But in the end, the person meant to protect her was the one who took it all away. Maha deserved better. The hardest truth. Not all monsters lurk in the dark. Some live behind smiles. Some call themselves family. Alexis Nelson wasn't just Maha's mother. She was supposed to be her shield, her safe place. Instead, she became the reason Maha never saw another sunrise. What can we learn? This story isn't just about one tragedy. It's about the silent battles people fight, the untreated trauma that festers, the mental health struggles that go ignored. How many more lives will be lost before we take action? How many more children will suffer before the system steps in? We can't change Maha's fate, but we can change how we respond to warning signs. A final thought. If this story leaves you with one message, it's this: pay attention to the quiet cries, to the hidden pain. Because sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones no one is looking at. Rest in peace, Maha. If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe for more stories that need to be told.